Hi, I am Fred from therequirementsengineer.com. In this video, I show you how to open a library in Draw.io. I start with a blank diagram, then I open an existing library. After that, I drag a full process onto the canvas from the library. And I also show you how to reuse single elements like one activity and one decision node. So you will see exactly how a Draw.io library works in practice. If you like practical tutorials about modeling and requirements engineering, please subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss the next videos. What is Draw.io? Draw.io, also known as diagrams.net, is a flexible diagramming tool. I use it for flowcharts, process diagrams, UML diagrams, network diagrams, and many other visual models. The basic idea is simple. I drag shapes onto the canvas. Then I connect them with arrows. After that, I add text structure and formatting. As a result, I can create clear diagrams very quickly. However, when I work with the same shapes again and again, I do not want to rebuild them every time. For example, I may need the same process structure. I may need the same activity shape, or I may need the same decision diamond. This is where libraries become useful. A library stores reusable diagram elements. So I can open the library and reuse prepared shapes directly from the left sidebar. Why open a library in Draw.io? I open a library when I already have reusable shapes saved. For example, I may have created a process library before, or I may have received a library from a teammate, or I may use the same symbol collection for many diagrams. Once I open the library, Draw.io shows it in the left sidebar. Then I can drag elements from the library onto the canvas. This saves time. It also keeps my diagrams consistent. And it helps me avoid mistakes because I reuse prepared elements instead of creating them again from scratch. Now let us open the library. Step 1. I start with a blank diagram. In this example, the canvas is empty. That is perfect because I want to show you how I built the diagram from the library. Step 2. I click File. Now the File menu opens. Here I choose Open Library. This is the important option. I do not choose New Library, but Open Library, because I already have a saved library file. So the path is simple. File, then Open Library. This tells Draw.io that I want to load an existing shape library into my workspace. Step 3. Now I select my library file. In this example, I open the library called Process Library Draw.io. Your file name may be different. However, the idea is the same. I find the folder, I select the library file, then I click Open. Step 4. Now the library appears in the left sidebar. Here I can see Process Library Draw.io. It appears below the Scratchpad. Inside the library, I can see different reusable elements. For example, I can see a complete process. I can see a single activity. I can see decision notes, and I can see errors or smaller prepared elements. This means the library opened correctly. Now I can start using it. This is important. The library does not automatically place anything on the canvas. It only gives me reusable elements in the sidebar. So I decide what I need. Then I drag that element onto the canvas. Step 5. First, I drag a full process onto the canvas. I take the prepared process from the library. Then I drag it into the empty workspace. Now Draw.io places the complete process on the canvas. In this example, the process starts with the activity "Device does not work." Then it continues with a decision. After that, it branches depending on the answer. So, with one drag and drop action, I can add a complete prepared process structure. This is very useful because I do not need to rebuild every shape. I do not need to reconnect every arrow. And I do not need to format every element again. Instead, I reuse a complete diagram part. As a result, I work faster, and I keep the same structure across several diagrams. Now step 6. I drag one single activity from the library onto the canvas. In this example, I use the activity "Device does not work." I click the activity in the library, then I drag it onto the canvas. Draw.io creates a new copy of that activity. The original activity stays inside the library, so I can use it again later. This is the second benefit of the libraries. I do not only have to store complete processes, I can also store single reusable shapes. For example, I can store one activity, I can store one system symbol, I can store one actor, or I can store one prepared requirement shape. This helps when I need only one element from a larger collection. Step 7. Now I drag one decision node onto the canvas. A decision node is a diamond shape in a flowchart or a BPMN process. In this example, I use the decision "bulb burned out." Again, I take it from the library, then I drag it onto the canvas. Now I have a reusable decision shape in my diagram. This is helpful when I build process diagrams step by step. For example, I may start with one activity and then I add a decision. After that, I add errors and more activities. So the library gives me flexibility. I can use a complete process, or I can use only the single elements that I need. Now you can see the difference clearly. First, I added a full process, then I added one single activity, and then I added one single decision node. All elements came from the same library. That is the main idea. A Draw.io library can contain complete diagram paths and small reusable elements. One important note: do not confuse a library with the Scratchpad. The Scratchpad is useful for quick temporary elements. However, a library is better when I want a named and reusable collection. For example, this library is called processlibrary.drawio. That makes it easier to organize. It also makes it easier to save and reuse later. So if I only need something quickly, the Scratchpad may be enough. But if I want a reusable collection for a project, a topic, or a diagram type, I use a library. When should I use a library in Draw.io? I use a library when I repeat the same diagram elements often. For example, I can use it for process diagrams. I can use it for network diagrams. I can use it for requirements engineering diagrams. And I can use it for branded diagrams with a consistent visual style. Libraries are especially useful when I create documentation, tutorials, or project diagrams, because consistency matters. When diagrams use the same visual language, readers understand them faster. Let us recap the workflow. I start with a blank Draw.io diagram, then I click File. After that, I choose Open Library. Then I select my saved library file. In this example, I use processlibrary.drawio. After I open the file, the library appears in the left sidebar. Then I can drag elements onto the canvas. Opening a library in Draw.io is a small step with a big effect. It helps me reuse complete process structures. It also helps me reuse single elements. And it keeps my diagrams consistent. So when you already have a saved library, do not rebuild everything manually. Open the library, drag the elements onto the canvas, and create your diagram much faster. If this video helped, support the channel. Please like the video and subscribe for more Draw.io tutorials. Also tell me in the comments, do you use Draw.io libraries for full processes, single shapes, or both? Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.